Welcome back to the Quickshow tutorial. This is Chapter 3 on Basic Functions. In this chapter, we'll talk about the Quickshow user interface, including the cue grid and the page tabs and categories. We'll also talk about the toolbar area and the different buttons there and how to use them. We'll talk about the preview window and the live controls area, as well as the effect area. So the very first thing about Quickshow is the cue grid. This is the largest area of the program. It's also the easiest area to use. Normally what you would do is just simply move your mouse pointer over the different cues in the cue grid, and you can see an animated view of each one of them. If you like what you see, just click the mouse down and instantly that cue will be selected. So you just move the mouse around, click down, select a cue, that cue starts playing. In the top area here we have tabs which select pages. At any point in time, even while an animation is playing, you can select a different page and see the cues that are in that page. And just like the cues in any other page, you can just click the mouse down and it will start that cue playing. As you see that there are many cues in this workspace. In fact, the workspace itself can hold about 3,200 cues total. And at the top area here we have something called categories. What you'll notice is that we have a lot of graphical items being viewed right now. But Quickshow also does beam effects and atmospherics. If we want to see the cues associated with atmospherics, we just click on this atmospherics button here, and we will see some additional tabs here and pages that are specific to atmospheric effects. Quickshow also offers an ability to show all of the pages at the same time by clicking on this All Pages button. So in this view, what you see is that now we see all of the page tabs available. And what you notice is that there's little colored triangles here in each one of the page tabs. And these colored triangles remind you which category the page tab is related to. So in this case, the red tabs are related to atmospheric effects, and the green tabs are related to graphic effects. At any point in time, you can add your own page by coming up here to the page menu and just say Add New Page. The page is added. Right there. And the page isn't really associated with any particular category right now. So you notice it does not have a colored tab. What we can do is we can right click on this page and select Page Properties, which allows us to associate that page with a category. For example, let's say we want to associate that with the graphics category. So now when we select the graphics category, you can see the page that we've added here. And to add cues to that page, there are several ways, but one way is to just simply right-click in a cue, and then you come up here to the Create menu, and you can create a new frame, new text effect, abstract, clock, or we can drag and drop things from the Quick Tools tab into our new page. Just like that. We can also move this page around with respect to the other pages. Like, for example, if we want to move this page to the left, we just select this menu item here. We want to move it to the right, we can select this menu here, and so forth. So the page menu here offers a lot of things to control page. You can also right-click on any of these tabs to get some common things that you can do with pages. Likewise, we can right-click in the category area and change the color of the category, rename, or even add a category. Like, for example, if we want to add a category that's related to DMX effects, just like that. So now we can have a category that's specific to DMX, and I can take the page that I just made, my page, and say that we want that page to be associated with DMX instead. So now my page will show up when I click on the DMX category, and we still have pages related to the atmospherics and graphics. So that's how you use the category buttons and the page tabs. Basically just let you move around on the workspace. So as you could see, you just click the cues and you can instantly have them triggered. Quickshow offers a number of ways to actually trigger these cues, and those ways are controlled by these buttons up here. The toggle mode means that when you click on the cue, it will start, and when you click it again, it stops. So it toggles, and there's an on-off toggling action when you use this toggle button. If we use restart, what will happen is when we click on a cue, it will restart it. So for example, in this jumping frog, if I click it again, click it again, and click it again, I can kind of, in the case of this jumping frog, accelerate the rate at which he jumps just by clicking faster. So each time I click on that cue, it will restart the animation. And that's true with any one of these. Just clicking on it will just simply restart that animation. What flash means is that as long as I'm clicking and holding the mouse button down on the cue, it will be visible, and when I release the mouse button from the cue, whoops, when I click, that's one interesting thing. When you click blackout, it tends to reset everything. And that's there to kind of get you out of trouble if you have put the workspace into a mode and trigger a number of things. You can click blackout, and that will automatically reset for you. But anyway, getting back to the flash mode, what flash will do is, as long as you're pressing and holding on the cue, you get the output. When you release the button, the output stops. So it's what lighting people call flash. And these cues, although I'm clicking on them with the mouse here, I can also type on them with the computer keyboard. You'll notice that each cue has a letter associated with it, and these letters are laid out exactly in the same order as a computer keyboard. So if I want to trigger this, I just press the Y key like that, and when I release the Y key, this cue will stop because I have it in flash mode. So basically there are three ways in which you can trigger cues. Toggle, which allows you to turn on and off the cues just like this. Restart, which each time you click on a cue will start the animation again. And flash, which as long as you're holding down the button, you see the cue, and when you release it, the cue goes away. There's another button up here called select, and what that allows you to do is select a cue without really affecting it. For example, what I'll do is go ahead and start this animation right here, and then come over here to select mode, and now what we can do is start clicking around the cues and we can select a cue that way, but not really affect the animation or the output. Now, the reason why we would want to select something and not really affect the animation is because we can select that cue and right-click and go into cue properties, and we can adjust properties about that cue, maybe send this cue to a different place, a different scanner, change something about the animation, make it go slower or faster. And another thing that we can do, and we'll talk about this later, if we want to create our own show while the existing laser show is going on, what we can do is just click on this and drag and drop these cues right down here into the timeline without really affecting this, because I'm in select mode. Select mode allows me to just click on something, select it, so that we can just drag and drop that down here into the timeline. So those are the cue triggering modes: toggle, restart, flash, and select. In this area we also have a couple of other buttons that we'll talk about now. One of the buttons is called transition. One of the things that's very unique about Quickshow, and really very nice, is that everything appears very soft. So when I click on a cue and then click on another cue, there is a transition between those cues. There's a natural softness about everything Quickshow does. Even if I click on this again, it fades out and zooms out. When I start a new cue, it fades in and zooms in. So everything about Quickshow looks smooth, and that's because this transition mode is enabled. If we turn off the transition by clicking that button up like that, now when we start something, it starts immediately. If we stop something, it stops immediately. And when we trigger another cue, it just instantly goes to that other cue. So it's a much more harder appearance, much more sudden and dramatic. And this could be something that's desired, that you want to instantly go from one cue to another without having any transition between those two. And if that's what you want, just click on that transition button right there to turn the transitions off. In this case, what I'm going to do is turn that transition back on so that you can see normally the transition is a morph between two cues, and the transition is fading in and out when you enable and disable the cues by clicking on them. Now, one very cool thing about Quickshow is that the right mouse button works on almost everything. As you saw, we can right click on the page and change the name of the page and change the category that the page is associated with. We can also even assign a function key. So for example, if I want to go right to that page, I can click on the function key F1 on the computer keyboard. You can right click on the categories and change the color, rename them. You can right click on cues and change the cue properties. And likewise, even on these buttons up here, you can right click on the button and it will access menus that are relevant to the button. So for example, by default our transition is a morph, but that doesn't have to be that way. We can always change that. For example, if I choose this zoom in, so now what will happen is new cues zoom in. It's kind of like a zoom in and zoom out as I start new cues. Perhaps it might be more visible like this. So you can see that now the transition between the cues is to zoom in and not to morph between them. So likewise, there are really a lot of different things that we can do here. We can crossfade between cues like that. We can also do various types of kind of video wiping effects. The transitions, a scroll left, various types of, like I say, kind of video effect looking transitions between them. So that's how you control the type of the transition that you want by selecting it here with the right mouse button. There's another way that you can control it and have even more control over what happens in the fade in, fade out time, and that's with the Dynamics tab. Normally over in this area you have a tab for live controls and effects, but we can also add another tab over here called Dynamics. If I come over here to the View menu and choose Show Dynamics tab, this tab here controls the various dynamics of the program, what we call soft pause, soft start and soft finish, and the transition, and also the transition duration. Right now the transition duration is half of a second, but we can increase that just by clicking in here. For example, we can make this 2 seconds. So now you'll see that the transition is much slower, actually taking up to 2 seconds to occur. We can select the transition type here just as well as right clicking. So on the Dynamics tab, this allows you to control a lot of the dynamic behavior of Quickshow. By right clicking on this button, it's a faster access to that, especially for beginners that would possibly be confused by the Dynamics tab. Right clicking in the transition is a much quicker way of getting there, but the Dynamics page really gives you a lot of control over how Quickshow works. So we've talked about the cue grid, how to move around on it. We've talked about pages and categories. What we'll talk about next is how to play more than one cue at the same time and even control those cues while they're playing. So I've clicked on a cue here, start that playing, and we have some buttons up here, one that says one cue and another that says multi-cue. If I'm in one cue mode, Quickshow will only allow me to play one cue at a time. And it doesn't matter what that cue is. Like, for example, I can come over here to the Atmospherics tab, to beam targets. That cue could be a beam target. That cue could be an atmospheric effect, like a fan effect like this. Or that cue can be a single graphic image. If we make a timeline-based show and drag and drop it to the grid, that cue could be an entire laser show. But nevertheless, we're in one cue mode, which means that Quickshow will only allow us to play one cue. That means one thing at a time. What we could do is have Quickshow enable us to play more than one cue at a time. And we do that by clicking on multi-cue. So I've started one playing, and so now I'm going to click two more cues. And so now what you see here is that we have 3 cues playing. And just like on the transition button, by right-clicking, we can control the transition. By right-clicking on the cue button, we can control exactly how many cues can be played at one time. So for example, if I go into 2 mode, and I'll start one, and I start a second one. Oops. When you press blackout, it resets that. So once again, I've got 2 cues. I start one cue playing. I'm going to start another cue playing. So we have 2 cues, and when I start a third cue playing, it cancels one of them. So basically, it will cancel the last one I triggered. So it always gives me the 2 most recent cues that I've clicked on. Likewise, if I go here into 3, I can have 3 cues playing, and it would be the 3 most recent cues that I trigger. So that's how you actually control how many cues you want to play and whether you want to play only one or multiple cues at the same time. So now that we have 3 cues playing, one of the things that you'll notice is that all 3 of these cues are really playing kind of on top of each other, and it makes a pretty confusing type of display. Well, Quickshow, in addition to being able to trigger the cues, it allows you to control the cues at the same time. So for example, what I can do, one of the things you'll notice is that we get these new little controls down in this area of each one of the cues that are playing. And so this one here will stop it from playing. So that's the stop button. I'll restart that. This is pause. So you see that the image is now paused. And if I click this triangle now, it turns into a play button. It will start playing again. This one here allows you to resize. So for example, if you click and hold the mouse down and move the mouse in a downward direction, it will size it smaller. If you move the mouse in an upward direction, it makes it larger. So this one allows you to control the size of the cue even while it's playing. And you'll notice that the arrow, when I move the mouse pointer over to that, has an up and down arrow because these are the directions that are relevant for this. Just click it and drag it up and downward, and you'll be able to control the size like that. This next one over here allows us to control the position. So we can just click and drag this up and over here. So now I can place that in the upper right hand corner. We can make it small. The next one over here allows us to control the rotation angle about the z-axis. That's like this axis right here. So for example, if I drag the mouse leftward, I can make him kind of look like he's walking up a wall. I can click down and move the mouse rightward and make him look like he's walking downward, and so forth. So for each one of these cues, what I can do is make it a bit smaller, reposition this, and so now what we have is 3 cues playing and a display that's not confusing because I can move cues around and control their position and size even while it's playing. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the live control area. And what this live control area allows you to do is control the currently displaying laser visuals live. And so for example, you can control the size here. This slider allows you to control the size. You can control the position, just moving things around like that. You can control the rotation angle of things with these controls here. These first 3 controls allow you to control the rotation angle, or you can control the rotation speed. And these far right 3 controls allow you to control the rotation speed. So for example, if I click and drag in this one, I get set the angle like that. If I click and drag in this one, it makes it continually rotate like that. I'll zoom out that a little bit to make that a little bit more visible. If you have a short monitor, as I do, you won't be able to see all of the live controls that are available to you, but instead you have this area to the right, which is actually a scroller. And so as you see, when I move my mouse pointer over there, it turns into a hand. If you click and drag this, you can see that there are some additional live controls here. This one allows us to control the color and recolor everything that we see up there. This one allows us to control the brightness of everything. This visible points allows us to make it look like we're kind of like drawing something in and erasing it. And the last 2 sliders are not used very often. They allow you to control the animation speed. So for example, if you take a look at the rate at which things are animating right now, if I move that to the far right, you'll see that things are animating much more quickly. If I move this to the far left, you'll notice things are animating much more slowly. And the scan rate, sometimes that's used to create a dramatic beam effect or so. For example, I can really slow that down and make the laser display start flickering, or really speed that up. This should be used kind of cautiously, just to make sure that you don't speed things up too fast for your scanners, although Quickshow does have some technologies in there to prevent that as well. Now, one thing about all of these controls is that when you click the right mouse button on them, it will reset the particular control. So, for example, this one here, if I zoom that out, if I click the right mouse button on it, it zooms back up to full size. If I take this one here, if I move it to the upper left-hand corner, if I simply right-click in there, it resets the position. Likewise, if I have this rotating like this, if I simply right-click on this, it will reset the position. There's also buttons here that will also reset the size, rotation, and the position as well. And in some of the controls, you'll notice that there are these buttons on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. These are quick ways to zoom out, fade out, and so forth. So if I click this one, it will zoom out the entire image. If I click this one, it will zoom it back in. If I click on this one, it will fade the image out, and click on this one, it will fade the image in. If I click on this one, it kind of gives me a little bit of a color cycle effect. And again, by right-clicking, we can reset this. Now, one thing you'll notice is that we have two buttons up here with this live control area. One that says Master and one that says Q. When this Master button is selected, we are controlling the overall view of all laser output. When the Q button is selected, it means that we're only going to be controlling that particular cue. Which particular cue? Well, it's the selected cue. If you take a look over here, we have a green rectangle over this cue. That one's selected. We can also select them just by clicking on them here in the preview window. So, for example, I've just selected that one, and now these controls will correspond exactly and exclusively to that cue and not really to all of the live controls. So, for example, I can recolorize only that one cue. I can change the brightness of only that one cue if I want to. And one of the things that you'll notice here is, of course, I can change the position and the size and the rotation angle of this cue. And this may look familiar, and the reason it looks familiar is because these controls over here are really just a shortcut for these controls here when you're in the cue mode. So, for example, if I click and drag upward, you'll notice I'm really just adjusting that slider. And if I click and drag this around, you'll notice I'm really just controlling that position control down there. So really, these controls here are just a shortcut to these cue-based live controls over here. So you can simply leave this in the master mode and only control the cue live controls in this area here if you want to. Of course, going into the cue mode like this, it gives you additional controls that are not available over here, such as the brightness and the color. Now, some of these controls that you see here may not be visible depending on the user mode you're in. When we talked about settings in the previous chapter, one of the things that we went through is talked about the quick setup. If you go through quick setup and you inform Quickshow that you're a beginner, one of the things that will happen is that certain controls will no longer be visible. Like, for example, now we don't really even have the opportunity to change whether we're talking about the cue or the master live controls. And even in the cue itself, some of the controls have been completely removed to prevent beginners from perhaps getting themselves into trouble or tripping over a control that might wind up to be confusing. So if you don't see certain controls on your screen, it's only because the user mode is is really in a non-advanced mode. So we'll go back to advanced mode. And so now you can see all of the controls here again. So once again, touching on the basic functions of Quickshow, we've talked about the cue grid, the page tabs, and the categories. Talked about how to select cues, how to select multiple cues, the preview window, and the live control section. There's only a couple of more things with respect to basic functions of Quickshow. One of the things that we did a little bit is work with the preview window in so much as clicking on these cues here. And the neat thing about that is that even if we have cues playing on multiple pages, as we do right here, so now we have 3 separate cues playing. I can get to those cues just by clicking on them, just like that. It'll go immediately to that page and select that cue. Another thing that we see about Quickshow is that it has these flashing underlines here. The flashing underline means that there's something happening on that page. For example, a cue playing. Later we'll find that those same flashing underlines will flash down in these tabs as well. Like if I activate a quick effects, it will recolorize or put some chop on these images. The quick effects is also flashing to let us know that there's something on that tab that's active and happening. And so that tells us that there's something happening there. To stop everything, we can press the blackout button, or we can also press the escape key, top left key on the computer keyboard. Just remember that if you ever have kind of an emergency situation where to stop all laser output immediately, just press the top left key on the computer keyboard, and that will stop everything. So let's do a couple more things here. A little bit. We'll cover a little bit of advanced stuff. The area down here, the very bottom of the Quickshow window, is the status bar. When you have your FB3 plugged in, this is what you'll see, the projector 1 here. As you have another FB3 and continue to add FB3s, they will also show up down here in the status bar. For example, what I can do is right-click in this area and do something called adding a demo projector, just to show you what it will look like if you have 2 projectors connected to Quickshow or two FB3s. When you plug in another FB3, it will show up down here. And it will show you the frames per second. This is the number of refreshes per second that the laser is doing. And this helps you to see the flicker potential. If you're displaying something of a very simple image like this, you can see that this is scanning 55 refreshes per second. If we have a more complex graphic, you'll see the laser takes longer to display that. Now it's being displayed at 35 frames per second. If our scanners are slower, for example, if we don't have 30K scanners, but instead if we have 20K scanners, one of the things that you'll notice is that this refresh rate slows down. And as the refresh rate continues to slow down, for example, if I add another cue here, now you can see that the laser's starting to flicker, and we're down to 13 or 14 frames per second. And this is also color-coded. And we did this so that if you're programming a laser show and you don't have the laser projector turned on, you can always look down here in the status line and see, is what I'm doing right now going to be flickering or not? And you get 2 indications of that. One is the actual frames per second count, and another is the color code too. So if I turn off this, color gets a little bit more kind of towards the shade of green, and this is color coded so that If you're displaying very quickly, it will be shades of green and blue, and as the scan rate slows down, it will be yellow and then coming into orange and then red. So this gives you an idea of how quickly you're scanning. If we right-click on this, we can also show this in the form of points and not in the form of frames per second. So sometimes this can help you to understand better how to relate to this. Some people relate to points more than they relate to frames per second. One user called and they said, "Hey, is this an indication that I'm harming my scanners when it goes red?" And it's not really an indication that you're harming anything. It's just an indication of flicker potential. Normally, you want to avoid flicker to have a pleasant display that customers are happy to view, and so normally you want to just stay, just towards the yellows and the greens. And the more cues that you have, the more laser information you're putting out there, the slower it's going to be displaying on the laser, and the more reddish that shade is going to be. So the last thing that we'll talk about with respect to the basic functions of Quickshow is a little bit more about the preview window. What I'll do is come back here into a multi-mode, and we'll start a cue playing. If you're an advanced user and you've set up your projection zones, one of the things that you'll notice is you have these two little buttons here, and one of the buttons has this little kind of 3x3 rectangle. When you click that, you'll see this here. It splits the preview window into 9 zones, and it's the 9 projection zones. And if you notice the layout of these keys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it may look familiar, and it's because it's the same layout as the numeric keypad on a computer keyboard. Now, the reason why we do this is so that if you want to take a cue and direct it specifically to a zone or to a different projector, different FB3 that's connected, all you need to do is click on this, and then from that point, when we start a cue playing, now that cue is playing in that zone. So if I want to start another cue playing in this zone, all I have to do is click on that. Since this is the overhead sweeping beams zone, what we'll do is we'll put some wave effect up there, let's say like that. So if we have multiple FB3s connected, what we can do is we can allocate these zones to FB3s and then instantly direct something to that just by clicking on the computer keyboard. For example, you have two hands. You could put your right hand on the numeric keypad like this, and then you can take your left hand and trigger cues just by clicking on the keys on the computer keyboard. And so that way you can play Quickshow just like you play a musical instrument with a two-handed kind of configuration. And one of the things that we see here is that a couple of flashing no projectors. That's because Zone 3 is set up as the Scanner 3 main zone, and it knows that we don't have a FB3 connected for Scanner 3. So it's just a reminder that if we click that, if we try to send something there, nothing's going to go there because we don't have a projector there. But if we can click on one of the other zones, like for example the secondary graphic zone, now I can click down and instantly direct laser directly to that zone. We can also, each cue has a zone that it will prefer. Like for example, all of these cues will prefer to go to zone 8 if they're not overridden by clicking on a different zone like this. But what you can do is you can go to the cue's preferred zones by clicking on this button here. You'll notice that now all of these go to zone 8 because that is the preferred zone for all of these cues. We can direct it to a cue by clicking on the keypad and then starting other cues. Also, we can get to the cue preferred zone by clicking the 0 on the computer keyboard. So when we click 0 on the numeric keypad, that selects this cue preferred zones. And we can always go back to a single view just by clicking here. When you're in a split zone, one of the things that you'll notice is that the cues are always displaying as kind of the line output. When we're in a single mode like this, the cues will be displaying as audience scanning beam effects if they're beam effects, or they'll be displaying as graphical images if they're graphical images. So don't be alarmed if you go into a split view and start directing things to an atmospheric zone, but they still look like lines anyway. That's mostly for clarity. So the last thing we'll discover in this tutorial is the beat system. The beat system is up here in Quickshow, and it's always running. The reason is because Quickshow is a very beat-oriented software. Throughout the workspace, we have images that will go to the beat of the music. So you see this drum beating to the beat of the music. This drummer likewise going to the beat of the music. This drum here. Cello playing directly to the beat of the music. And not only graphic images. For example, this star dancing directly to the beat of the music. These dancers here dancing to the beat of the music. Not only graphical images, but also a lot of the atmospheric effects that we include with the system. For example, this one here, which will zoom in and out directly to the beat of the music. And these hot beams here. And any of the targeted beam sequences go directly to the beat of the music. And the beat system is set up here simply by tapping to the beat of the music. So for example, as you see right now, each time the beat changes, and that little metronome moving back and forth, kind of ticking off the time for us, each time the beat changes, we trigger another beam position. So to change the beat of the music, there's a couple of ways, but normally what you would do is simply tap the space bar to the beat of the music. And if you tap it 10 times, Quickshow will capture the beat of the music and lock into the beat of the music. So for example, let's say we have some music playing. I'm just going to mock some like. So you see now that Quickshow has locked into this faster beat of the music, and now the beats are going faster, the beams are going faster. If I come back here to the graphic page and come over here to the music related page, you'll notice that he's moving a little bit faster. And so likewise, let's say that we come to a point in the music where it starts slowing down. All we have to do is tap the space bar a little bit more slowly to the beat of the music, and you'll notice that everything in Quickshow then starts slowing down. This dancer starts moving slower. If we go back to this drum beat animation, it's beating a little bit more slowly. Come to the atmospheric effects. This is going more slowly. So a lot of things in Quickshow can go to the beat of the music if you want them to. And that is controlled by the effects that you make and also within the animations that you create as well. For example, we'll come back here to the music and dancers related page, and we'll take a look at how this really works. So if I right click on this and I go edit frame and animation, one of the things that we can see is that this is a 5-frame animation. Okay? And if I right click on the cue again and go to cue properties, come over here to image, one of the things that we see is that we have asked Quickshow to make this a beat-based animation. And what's going to do with that beat-based animation is ping pong. So the drum stick is going to come down and then bounce back up. It's going to be a ping pong type animation. and we say, okay, what do we want to have happen over that total duration? What we want to have happen is that the total number of beats that will take for that drumstick to come down is a half a beat. So since we're ping-ponging, it's going to go through one whole beat. We'll pick it perhaps an easier example, which is this one here. We'll take a look at this animation. It's a 4-frame animation. Starts here and ends there. So basically, it kind of ends up where it starts. So if we take a look at what we've asked Quickshow to do on this one, we'll right-click, choose Properties, and the image, what we're doing is simple looping. It means that this animation is going to happen over and over again, and based on the beat. And once again, the total number of beats that's going to happen for this whole animation is 2 beats. So when this goes back and forth, each time you see that little BPM flash and change, it means a beat has happened. So we have boom, 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 boom. Each time the animation happens, we will get 1 beat. What we can make happen is make this work in a little bit of a different way. It's the same kind of thing for this VU meter here. If you right click and say Q properties, you'll see that we've asked this to ping pong again, and then do that animation over just a half of a beat. So each beat, that meter's gonna kind of change back and forth. So that's how we can control Quickshow in format that we want this to happen to the beat of the music with respect to animations, because we tell it with respect to the animation be a beat-based animation. There's another thing we could do. What we'll do is come over here. Let's say we just want to take a simple circle like that. So we have a simple circle like this. We can come over here to the effect system, and we can add something here called an oscillating zoom effect. So by default, that zoom is going to happen to the beat of the music. That's this thing here. It says number of beats, 1. We can also make this happen over, for example, a 4-beat period of time. So now over 4 beats, this is going to oscillate up and down over a 4-beat period of time. So as the beat of the music speeds back up, what you can see is that circle will speed back up as well. We'll come back here and we'll say we want it every 1 beat. So now you can see that when the beat of the music sped up very fast, the effect that we have assigned to this cue, this simple circle, this oscillating zoom effect, is happening every beat. We can change that if we want to. We can say, okay, we want it to happen every 1 second, and so forth. We can even change how that zooms up and down. We can say, okay, we'll make it do a different kind of a zooming action. That's what we call linear. And we can make it accelerate and decelerate. So that's kind of like ping pong, but with a little bit more smoothness. But in any event, the main point to keep in mind is that Quickshow is a very beat-oriented software, and a lot of the animations that we include with Quickshow have already been assigned to the beat of the music. So if the beat slows down, just by tapping the spacebar more slowly, the animations will also slow down. Certain beam effects will also slow down. If you set up your targeted meme effects to happen to the beat of the music, they will also slow down. As the beat of the music gets faster, you just tap in the space bar to the beat of the music. and it will automatically pick up that beat. So there's a couple of other ways that you can control the beat of the music with Quickshow. If you right-click in here, what you could do is you could specify exactly the beat of the music that you want in terms of the BPM. So we could type in, like for example, 128 beats per minute. Just tap that in. There you go. We also have ways of quickly getting places. So for example, let's say that you tapped in the space bar to the beat of the music like this. And that's the real beat of the music, but you want Quickshow to really be faster or slower in terms of what it does to the beat of the music. So if you right click here, we can say, okay, Quickshow, do everything twice as fast as the beat of the music, or do everything half as fast as the beat of the music. So these are ways in which you can just kind of very quickly get around the beat, and also some quick times over here that are pretty standard: 120 beats per minute, 160 beats per minute, 240 beats per minute, and so forth. So the main thing that you would do is tap the space bar to the beat of the music. If you tap it 10 times, you'd be pretty sure, guaranteed, to get that beat of the music. Once Quickshow's got it, an awful lot of the things that it will do has already been programmed to do to the beat of the music. A lot of the effects in here, especially these mixed effects here, do things to the beat of the music. The dancing and musically oriented graphical effects all go to the beat of the music. Beam sequences definitely go to the beat of the music. And that's how you set the beat of the music, simply by tapping the space bar. In a future chapter, we'll talk about the virtual laser jockey and a way that you can feed audio directly into Quickshow and have it pick up the beat that way. But the easiest and most reliable way to use the beat system is to simply tap the space bar to the beat of the music. Once Quickshow has that, everything that Quickshow has been programmed to run to the beat of the music, it will.